Yo, Atlas speaking and welcome to part 7 of What If I Was Reborn in Naruto as a civilian stuck in a time loop with the gamer system. Let the tale begin. Chapter 121. Stats. Name, Kazuo. Race, human. Affiliation, Hidden Leaf Village. Age, 13. Strength, A. Endurance, B. Agility, A. Intelligence, B+. Charisma, A. Chakra, B. Skills. Time loop, rank 3. Minato Taijutsu, 10 out of 10. Advanced Shuriken Jutsu, 6 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Intermediate Kenjutsu, 7/10. Advanced Kenjutsu, 4/10. Beginner Fuinjutsu, 5/10. Beginner Fuinjutsu, 7 out of 10. Paper Clone, 10 out of 10. Paper God Technique, 10 out of 10. Paper Illusion, 9 out of 10. Paper Illusion, 10 out of 10. Paper Shuriken, 10/10. Shunshin / Body Flicker Jutsu, 10 out of 10. Hiding Like a Mole Technique, 10 out of 10. Ean Release, Mind Exhaustion, 5/10, 8 out of 10. Ean Release, Mind Break, 4 out of 10, 7 out of 10. Water Release, Severing Water Wave, 9 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Bullet, 10 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Wall, 8/10, 9 out of 10. And there is more but no new jutsu, just an overall upgrade in mastery and some. Looking at his status panel, Kazuo was both delighted and at the same time disappointed. He hadn't gotten the chance to learn any new jutsu. Minato hadn't given him access to the library again and honestly, it was quite the disappointment. I thought you were supposed to be my diamond spoon, damned it, why am I not getting spoiled rotten? Kazuo thought to himself as he continued to body flicker, his face on the outside was completely blank of any emotions. Though I have started training on the Rasengan recently, it's honestly not that useful to me considering I don't have the chakra reserves to spam it, but it's better than not having it. Kazuo thought to himself. Though the system doesn't show it until I get at least a 4 out of 10 rating on the mastery. Kazuo thought as he and the rest of his team continued their journey back to the Hidden Leaf Village. Hours later, the four arrived at the gate. He didn't have to wait for entrance as a Jonin. Kazuo had his chakra signal already registered on the barrier so he could simply pass the inspection whilst the rest of his chunni had to stay back. However, they weren't needed in his report of the mission to the Hokage, so the mission could be said to be officially over. Jumping on top of roofs at high speeds, Kazuo quickly landed on the roof of the Hokage Tower and then slipped down to the window of the office and knocked. "Come in," said a tired voice from inside whilst Kazuo opened the window with a grin on his face. "How are you, sensei? You look just as great as always," Kazuo said teasingly as he looked at Minato, who looked like he hadn't slept in days, more tired than he had been after killing 1,000 IWA shinobi. "You all have certainly been having your fun. Did Jiraiya teach you how to come in through the window now?" Minato asked as he shook his head with a soft smile on his face as he looked at his student. "Considering I'm only doing this since I saw Jiraiya do it in the anime, then I guess it was him?" "Yes, that's good enough to throw him under the bus." Kazuo thought inwardly in a split second before nodding his head. "Yes, Jiraiya-sama said that this is how the disciple of the Hokage should go inside the office," Kazuo said, the lies slipping off his tongue as natural as water. "I can see that happening so clearly," Minato muttered under his breath. "Anyway, sensei, I completed the mission," Kazuo said as he threw a blue mission scroll at Minato, who quickly caught it in the air and gave a light nod. "By the way, sensei, how is Kushina these days? Haven't seen her in a while. Is everything going well with the Ino?" Kazuo asked, avoiding the word pregnancy as it was still a nationwide secret that even most Umbu didn't know. "Yes, everything is going well, though she told me that she will rip you apart when she sees you again." "Her words, not mine," Minato replied with a soft grin of his own. "Ah, then I'll just have to make sure to not meet her," Kazuo replied, nodding his head as if all made sense in the world. "Who would want to meet that heathen? Damn bitch keeps banging my head with punches and I can't even avoid them," Kazuo thought inwardly. In the next second, however, Kazuo's demeanor changed as he looked at Minato seriously. Is Danzo acting up? Kazuo asked, his voice cold as ice. For a moment, Minato was slightly taken aback by the sudden change and the question before shaking his head. No, nothing yet. I know that you have a troubled history with him, however, he is still elite shinobi. Minato replied seriously. I see, thanks, Kazuo replied before releasing a wave of chakra directly into his brain, causing his death in an instant as his brain exploded and blood spilled out of his mouth, nose, eyes, and ears. Thump! Minato was left dumbfounded as he saw Kazuo drop down dead on the floor. The umbus surrounding the room had a single collective thought. What the fuck? Time rewinded back, it however didn't rewind for 2 days or 1 day. Merely a few minutes to right before Kazuo had entered the Hokage office. If someone had seen Kazuo's eyes at this moment, they would have seen his orange shining iris and the clock-shaped pupils in the middle of his eyes. It's better to rewind, Danzo most likely has umbu infiltrating the office. Kazuo thought as he entered inside and followed the same actions of his previous turn. His rank charisma helped quite a lot so that the scenario turned out close if not exactly as during the previous turn, with the only change being that Kazuo didn't ask for info about Danzo. Well then, I'll get going, sensei. I gotta head back or Saori will give me the silent treatment again, Kazuo said with a laugh as he scratched the back of his head awkwardly as if reminiscing about past scenarios. Yes, wouldn't want that. See you later, Kazuo. Minato replied with a glint in his eye as he chuckled. Chapter 122. What are you thinking, you crazy bastard? I'm not whipped like you. Kazuo thought to himself whilst showing one last smile on the outside and body flickering away towards the Hyuga district. Arriving at his house on the outskirts of the district, Kazuo headed in directly and walked to a small room in which he had set up his office. It was called an office, but he didn't really do much in it besides sit around and think about his plans for the future whilst reading some random theory scroll on chakra or jutsu as a whole. During the Nine Tails attack, if it does happen, I have 3 major objectives I need to accomplish. Kazuo thought to himself. Number 1 on the list is killing Danzo. This shit has gone on long enough. Kazuo thought darkly as he moved to his second objective. Number 2 is stealing the forbidden jutsu scroll. This can be done easily and I can simply turn back time after memorizing everything inside it. Kazuo thought as a grin showed on his face. It was at this exact moment that he heard the sound of the front door of his house opening before light footsteps could be heard as someone walked inside. Getting up from his precious leather chair that he had bought, Kazuo walked outside of his office into the corridor to see Saori placing her sandals away. Welcome back. Did the mission go well? Kazuo asked as he leaned on the doorframe. Everything went well, Saori replied. Her voice wasn't as cold as it had been, however it wasn't warm either. And finally, the third objective is to manufacture a life and death scenario for Saori. Kazuo thought as he felt like smiling, however, he didn't. He knew that if he did, it would most certainly not be a loving smile but more of a dark, twisted, almost deranged one. Is there any food left? Saori questioned as she started walking towards the living room. No idea, I just returned from my mission today as well. If there's none then we can just go eat out, Kazuo replied as he walked behind her. The two walked with light footsteps though not silent ones. It was one of the rules inside a shinobi house. If they walked too silently, they could give the other a surprise which could easily land with a kunai in the offender's face purely on reflex. The days continued to pass calmly, almost like the calm before the storm. Finally, after much wait, it was October 10th. Kazuo woke up in the morning, getting out of bed as silently as possible. He walked to the backyard where he started doing his morning taijutsu kata still in what was basically his pajama. Half an hour later, just as the sun was starting to rise, Kazuo headed inside, and put a kettle on the stove to boil some coffee before walking into his bedroom and changing into his shinobi attire. By the time he was finished, he arrived back in the kitchen, filled himself with a cup of coffee, and walked back into the backyard where he sat down and started sipping his coffee slowly. Finally, after more than a year since I came into this world, it's finally here. Kazuo thought. His mind was calm, with no disturbances, as if he was in meditation. A few minutes later, Saori joined him on the backyard porch with a cup of tea as she sat down. It's a nice day. Do you have any plans? Kazuo questioned softly as he gazed at the backyard and the small pond which had a few koi fish inside. Should I catch some to eat? They're probably tasty. Kazuo thought inwardly as he took a sip of his coffee. Don't. Saori simply said as she continued to sip her green tea. I was just thinking about it, Kazuo replied, not affected by her rejection at all. Do I always have to remind you that they are sacred in Hyuga tradition? Saori replied with a soft sigh. I wasn't going to do anything, Kazuo replied with a chuckle. Right, like the time you said that and the branch head came only to find you with a koi fish in your hand. Thankfully you hadn't killed it yet. Saori replied, her voice calm as always. I don't think I've ever seen her show any emotion besides disgust and calmness. Kazuo thought as he shook his head. That was before I knew of your tradition. And to be fair, that happened after Minato-senpai put us through a hellish training session. Kazuo replied. Saori didn't seem to want to gift him with another word as she simply continued drinking her tea. So as I was asking before, do you want to go out for dinner tonight? I heard they're holding this event at this new library, we could go grab some books and dinner. Kazuo said as he turned his face away from the backyard and towards her. I'm free, Saori replied before going back to silence once more. Good, with this, I'll be next to her during the possible Ninetales attack. I'll just have to rewind the time after until I find the perfect spot so that she will be attacked. Kazuo thought inwardly. Chapter 123, Saori and Kazuo quickly separated as she went about her day. Good now, it's time I set some of my plans in order. Kazuo thought as he immediately created 3 shadow clones. The clones gave a nod at him before each put on a blank white mask, reminiscent of the root Umbu ones, before quickly using the body flicker jutsu and disappearing from view. The real body of Kazuo meanwhile headed to the training ground and started doing his regular training as if it were just another day. The minutes turned into hours, and soon enough, the sun was starting to disappear behind the horizon. Kazuo quickly headed back to his house in the Hyuga district, had a shower, and dressed himself up in casual clothes. Underneath the clothes, however, were 2 wrist guards, inside of which his entire arsenal was sealed. Going out into the living room of his house, Kazuo gazed at Saori, who was similarly dressed in casual clothes. Are you ready? Kazuo asked with a kind smile. Saori merely gave a nod as she sat up and started walking towards the front door. The two left their house quietly and started walking out of the Hyuga clan compound. Walking through the streets of Konoha, Kazuo saw the hundreds of civilians around the village, smiling, laughing as they went on about their evening. Dozens of them gave him smiles that he quickly returned with smiles of his own. So clueless. I guess the entirety of Konoha was clueless. Even the shinobi. Kazuo thought as he walked past them. He didn't feel the need to warn the leaf, he didn't feel the need to do something so that the casualties would be lowered. No, all he felt was a cold detachment, be it from this world, its people, or even his supposed wife, whom he had married. At the end of the day, nothing besides me matters. Kazuo thought almost emotionlessly as he felt like sneering in the faces of the civilians who treated him kindly as if he were some kind of great hero. Some kind of savior who had kept them protected through his feats in both the war and his missions. Kazuo led Saori towards the first place he thought might be attacked by the Nine Tails. It was just a bit away from the Hokage Tower, yet still in a clear line with it. In the anime, the Nine Tails stands in front of the Hokage Tower when it shoots the tailed beast bomb. Kazuo thought as he walked with Saori in that direction. It was just past 10 in the evening when he felt it. Kazuo felt it instantly, and so did every ninja in the Leaf Village. It wasn't just the ninja that did, it was the entire population, be they babies, children, teenagers, middle-aged men and women, or old people. They all felt it the second it happened. An enormous amount of pure malicious killing intent spread throughout the entire Leaf Village. It was suffocating, as if it had drained the air they breathed directly from their lungs. So this is the Nine Tails. The 8 Tails and Killer Bee were nowhere near this. Kazuo thought as he quickly took control of his emotions. It was at this moment that he saw it, a man wearing a black cloak and a spiral mask, appear near the end of a small side road to Kazuo's and Saori's left. A splitting grin appeared on Kazuo's face as he saw the man bite his finger. "Good, you're great, Madara." "Ah, thank God." Kazuo thought with exhilaration as he saw the spiral-masked man slam his hand on the ground, sealing marks quickly spreading on the ground under his hand. Kazuo didn't move, he didn't do anything to stop it, he didn't even bother to protect Saori. This turn isn't the final one, there's no need to do anything besides gather information. Kazuo thought as he used the body flicker jutsu and disappeared from his location in an instant. Saori turned around in shock to see Kazuo disappear in a show of incredible speed. "What?" she asked in confusion, but she didn't have to think anymore. No, it was rather that she didn't have the capacity to think. The Nine Tails was unleashed at that second. The close proximity made it so that she had no chance of escape. Kazuo, who was leaning his back against a wall on top of a high building a few hundred meters away, watched calmly as his wife was crushed from a tail swing by the nine-tailed beast. When the tail moved away, he could see her splattered organs and remains on the ground. However, he felt nothing. No, that would be a lie. He felt something. It was amusement. Kazuo felt a chuckle rise through his throat as he watched the deaths of hundreds. The Nine Tails woke up and chose violence. Huh? Kazuo thought to himself as he turned his head towards the west side of the village. More than a kilometer away from where his real body was, one of Kazuo's shadow clones, wearing a blank white mask, was currently infiltrating the root headquarters. On the complete opposite direction, another shadow clone wearing a similar mask was infiltrating the Uchiha clan grounds. And finally, in a direct line of sight from the Nine Tails, a shadow clone was heading into the Hokage office calmly. Let's see how this turn plays out. Kazuo, the real one, thought calmly as he walked a few steps forward and leaned on the railing of the building's balcony, watching the Nine Tails once more. Chapter 124. Inside the root headquarters, Kazuo's shadow clone, wearing a blank umbu mask and a black cloak that hid his body, was walking through a long, dim hallway. He could hear alarms ringing in the base, and it didn't take long for his enemies to appear before him. The clone didn't hesitate as he saw 5 root umbu appear before him at the end of the long, dim tunnel, making a single hand seal. Hundreds of paper slips appeared around him as they floated in the air. They had been painted completely black beforehand, making them appear more like pieces of void rather than paper. Kazuo had decided to paint them so that it would make it hard to distinguish that it was his paper style. The papers rushed towards the root shinobi. It wasn't hard, no, it was extremely easy. The shinobi didn't stand a chance as the papers wrapped themselves around their bodies. Even as they cut hundreds, thousands more would appear until they were completely covered in them. Kazuo simply raised his left hand and closed it in a fist, muttering softly, "Paper burial." The second his hand was closed in a fist, the papers covering the 5 root umbu shuddered before quickly crushing the shinobi, causing their blood to splatter out and their organs and flesh to be turned into a soft, mushy substance. Not bad, Kazuo thought as he continued to walk calmly into the base. I didn't think it would work, but I guess it did. He thought before hearing a notification-like sound from his system. Paper style, paper burial has been mastered. Interesting, it was considered mastered on my first attempt. Kazuo thought as he arrived at a crossroads. The dim tunnel split into 5 different paths. I guess I'll have to spend a few turns until I find out everything that's in here. Kazuo thought as he chose the first path from the left and started walking towards it, unhurried and completely calm. At this moment, on the other side of the village, precisely in the Uchiha clan grounds, another shadow clone wearing the same cloak and blank mask appeared in front of the Uchiha Naka shrine. I'll check out that stone tablet during this first turn, Kazuo thought as he walked inside the empty shrine. It was at this moment that he saw 3 shinobi appear before him, their red eyes with 3 tomo shining into the night. Kazuo disappeared in an instant, or at least it appeared like he vanished. In fact, all he had done was cover himself with paper slips in an instant and use them to camouflage himself. Where is he? One of the Uchiha guards said as he scanned the area with his Sharingan. However, he couldn't find anything. Right here, Kazuo said, his voice making it clear that he was right in the middle of their group even though he couldn't be seen. 3 explosion tags were plastered onto each of the Uchiha before Kazuo used the body flicker and activated the tags. Boom! And the Uchiha were turned into mangled bodies in an instant. They had died before they could even react. Invisibility really is broken. Kazuo thought to himself as he walked to the 7th tatami mat from the far right in the main hall of the shrine and lifted the mat up, revealing a set of stairs that went underground. They didn't even use seals or anything. Are the Uchiha dumb or just overconfident? Kazuo thought as he started walking down the stairs. Most likely overconfident, that was what Itachi declared them as, and they do seem like the type. Kazuo thought to himself as he continued walking down. At the same moment, in front of the Hokage mountain, inside the Hokage tower, another shadow clone of Kazuo appeared. Standing right in front of the Hokage office, Kazuo gave a light shrug before opening the door. In an instant, 4 shinobi were already pointing kunai at his throat. Not even a greeting? Well, this can be considered a greeting too. Kazuo said as he chuckled, his voice distorted through a chakra manipulation technique that he had learned a while back. Identify yourself. One of the guards said. You really think I'll do that when I'm dressed like this? Kazuo asked the man, looking at him like he was staring at a dumb child. I swear, some of the shinobi in this world are complete and utter idiots. Kazuo thought as he sighed in disappointment, though he didn't hold any such emotions, it was completely an act, a perfected act at that. In a flash of movement, 4 shinobi lost their heads. It didn't take longer than a split second for the battle to be decided. Seems like the real Hokage guards aren't here, and these guys were just sent as replacements, most likely Chunins. Kazuo thought as he flickered his small tanto, throwing the blood that had clung to its blade onto the ground. Well, that just makes it easier for me. They do say not to look at a gift horse in the mouth. Wait, was that the saying or was it a donkey? Kazuo thought to himself as he walked to the right side of the office, where hundreds of scrolls were. Now then, the question is whether the scroll of seals is really here or if it was all just a sham by the 3rd Hokage in the anime. Kazuo thought as he opened the drawers one by one. It was a sham. Kazuo thought that after finding nothing, no matter how much he looked, there was only mission details and only a B-rank missions at that. Well, it was worth at least checking out. Kazuo thought with a shrug as he dispelled himself. Chapter 125, in the middle of the village, right in front of the Hokage tower, the 9 tails was wreaking havoc. Buildings were being destroyed in a single swing from its tails and claws as the enraged 9 tails, which had finally been freed after dozens of years, tried to enact its revenge on its jailers. As it raised its head high and roared, something unexpected happened. The might 9 tails felt its consciousness vanish as a foreign chakra invaded its being. Its red-slitted pupils dilated for a moment as 3 tomo appeared on its eyes before the pupil enlarged upon itself once more, barely showing the new addition of the 3 tomo as they spun in its eyes lazily. Hundreds of shinobi had already appeared around it and were launching dozens of jutsu, however, none had any effect on its fur, let alone on its flesh. An ear-piercing roar was heard as the 9 tails turned its attention towards the insects around it once more and started attacking them indiscriminately. Hundreds of meters away from it, a man wearing black armor appeared. Next to him were a group of Konoha's elites, all of them elite Jonin. Lord Third, what should we do? The 4th Hokage is currently unavailable. Something must have happened. A man wearing a green vest asked. We must fight to protect our home, Hiruzen said simply as he gazed at the 9 tails. I'll take it away from here, Hiruzen announced as he bit his thumb and, in a flash of seals, summoned his companion. Monkey King, Enma. You old dog, what did you call me for this time? The monkey asked before feeling the bloodlust in the air and turning to face the 9 tails. You've got to be joking. The monkey said after a few moments of silence. Hiruzen chuckled, though it was clear that his voice held no such emotion. Let's go, partner. You can't defeat it, Hiruzen. You are much too old for this. Where is your successor? Enma asked. He's being held back by someone, most likely, and as for my students, it seems like they've abandoned this old man, Hiruzen said as he extended his hand towards Enma. After years of being together, the Monkey King didn't need to hear Hiruzen say it to know what he wanted to do. With a sigh, the Monkey King changed its form into a large bow staff and a puff of white smoke. Hiruzen didn't waste a single second longer as he launched himself towards the Ninetales in an impressive show of speed. In less than a few seconds, he was right in front of it and pointing his bow staff. It all happened in seconds. The bow staff extended as it hit the Ninetales right in its chest, sending it crashing through dozens of houses and away from the middle of the village. However, as it happened, it was being dragged straight towards the Uchiha clan compound, crushing all houses in its way before finally landing on the edge of the village. Kazuo, his real body, who was leaning against the railing of a random building, whistled as he watched the scene. I'm starting to think the Uchiha were more and more justified with their actions with each second that's passing, Kazuo mumbled with a chuckle as he gazed at the scene in front of him. At the same time, on the west side of the village, below the ground, Kazuo's shadow clone had reached the end of the tunnel. To his side stood dozens of doors, and in front of him was a small hall which looked to closely resemble a locker room from his past life. So this is the sleeping dorms of sorts? Kazuo wondered as he opened a random door to his left. In an instant, a tanto was thrust towards his head, however, it missed as Kazuo tilted his head slightly to the right. In an instant, a punch was thrown directly to the attacker's stomach, causing the man to bow in pain. Kazuo didn't let the opportunity go as he raised his other hand and placed it on top of the man's head. In style, mind break. In less than a second, the man was left a frothing, foaming mess on the ground. So the root umbu do feel pain. Danzo clearly didn't do a good enough job. Kazuo thought to himself as he shrugged and turned around, walking back through the tunnel. 4 pathways left. Kazuo thought to himself as he continued his calm, unhurried gait. Meanwhile, at the Uchiha clan grounds, the other Kazuo's shadow clone saw the ceiling of the underground Naka shrine start trembling, almost collapsing down on him, but it held on thankfully. Turning around, he saw that his exit had been blocked by debris. The underground wasn't destroyed, thankfully. I guess they simply rebuilt the outside during the time skip from Naruto's birth and the start of the anime. Kazuo thought calmly as he turned and continued to walk down the stairs. It didn't take more than 20 seconds before he arrived at his destination. Before him was a small square room, the room floor of which was covered in tatami mats, and in the far back, at the center, stood a small stone plate. On the sides of the stone inscribed plate stood 2 small lit torches. No one's here, Kazuo thought with a smile under his mask as he walked to the stone plate. Lifting his hand, Kazuo made a single hand seal before dozens of paper slips appeared before him and started attaching themselves to the stone tablet. A moment later, the papers were detached from the tablet, but they still held their shape. The inscriptions on the tablet had been transferred over to the paper slips. Good, I'm interested in exactly what Black Zetsu wrote on this thing, Kazuo thought as he sealed the papers inside a scroll before turning towards the stairs once more. Guess explosions are needed once more. They always are, Kazuo thought as his lips turned upwards. Chapter 126, Guess explosions are needed once more. They always are, Kazuo thought as his lips turned upwards. Raising his hand towards the debris that had blocked the staircase to the exit, Kazuo's hand started dismantling into paper slips as they quickly attached themselves to the debris and the ceiling, whilst, at the same time, a wall of paper resembling a dome started surrounding him. This is a shadow clone and this is most certainly not the last turn of this night. However, I'll still continue trying as hard as I can, as if it's my last, Kazuo thought as he activated the chakra inside the paper slips that had been attached to the debris and ceiling. Instantly, the tens of paper slips lit up in a neon orange color before they exploded. Boom! The explosion was loud, however, it wasn't heard by anyone. The sound of the roars and the chaos that the Ninetales was causing, together with the amount of bloodlust that I was releasing, had completely muffled it. The paper dome dissolved itself as the papers gathered back toward Kazuo and reformed his arm and created a pair of angelic wings behind him. In an instant, with a quick flap of the paper wings, Kazuo launched himself into the night sky, looking down at the destruction the Nine Tails had already caused. The Uchiha compound was laid before him, almost completely ruined. A major part of it didn't even resemble houses anymore, merely random debris strewn about where the Nine Tails had been pushed through and where its tails had slammed onto the ground. Chakra is made up of spiritual and physical energies, however. Still, shouldn't chakra be lighter than regular mass? The amount of destruction by the mere weight of the Nine Tails shouldn't be this much, even if the beast was made up completely of flesh and muscle and bone. Kazuo thought as he kept hovering in the sky using his paper wings. Is this specific to tailed beasts? Because of their more malevolent chakra? Does it cause even matter to be damaged more from simple touches? It would make sense for biological beings, however, for even concrete to react the same. Interesting. Kazuo thought before turning around and launching himself toward the direction of his root clone. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, Minato Namikaze stood before a masked figure in the woods. "Who are you?" Minato questioned, his voice cold, bloodlust radiating off him in waves. The masked man didn't reply. Instead, he simply launched himself toward Minato. His speed was impressive, clearly already in the ranks of Kage. However, it didn't matter. Minato was much quicker. His body almost became a blur as he appeared in front of the man, a Rasengan already charged in one hand. Boom! The Rasengan hit. However, it hadn't hit the man. Instead, it had passed right through him and hit the ground, leaving a large crater. Half of the masked man's body had dissolved into smoke that quickly went around Minato and reformed into a hand holding a kunai that shot straight toward Minato's throat. FSH. With a single-handed sign, Minato teleported a few dozen meters away, looking coldly at the man. A Manjiku Sharingan, the unique ability? Is it being able to transform one's body into smoke and then reform it? Is that one ability or the combination of two? Minato wondered, quickly analyzing the single combat exchange in a matter of a split second before shooting a marked Thunder God kunai towards the man. Let's see just how much of his body he can reform, as well as the timing, the speed of the transformation. Minato thought to himself as he charged another Rasengan in his left hand. The masked man quickly started transforming the rest of his body into smoke, however, before he could, the kunai had already arrived right before him. However, it was still a moment too late as it passed through his upper body, yet the man hadn't noticed something. Minato didn't teleport to the kunai. Instead, he teleported under the man, where he had left a Thunder God mark right after using the Rasengan earlier. In an instant, the Rasengan in his left hand was slammed right into the man's lower body, which had yet to completely turn into smoke. One leg was completely obliterated, blood and flesh splattering everywhere, whilst the other was just as mangled and barely held onto the bone. "You're as big a genius as they say, 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze. I'll be taking my leave, you win this battle," the man said, his voice distorted likely from some jutsu as he made a single-hand seal, and in a puff of smoke, he disappeared, having likely teleported away. Minato didn't waste a single second as he flashed a sign and teleported away onto the Hokage mountain faces. It was at this moment that the Nine Tails turned its head to face Minato, sensing his chakra and bloodlust. Opening its giant maw, it quickly started gathering an enormous amount of chakra, forming a giant purple ball. A Bijudama. The attack that the Rasengan itself had been based on. Minato's hands quickly flashed tens of signs being completed in mere seconds before he held out a Thunder God kunai. And the Bijudama was released. It destroyed every house and building under it from sheer pressure as it headed straight towards the Hokage mountain, where space itself started to bend and hundreds of seals appeared midair, seeming to engulf the entire ball of malevolent chakra. In an instant, it looked like space itself had devoured it before Minato flashed one last sign. A mere second later, an explosion of immense magnitude appeared tens of kilometers behind the Hokage mountain, lighting up the entire night sky. That attack could obliterate the entire village, and Naruto can spam those in the future? Hard work can beat talent, my ass. Kazuo thought as he flew above the village. Chapter 127. It was at this moment that Kazuo's eyes turned golden, a clock appearing inside them as it started spinning backward, the entire world turning black and white. What's happening? Kazuo thought to himself. Before he felt it, he turned his head and saw it. His main body was floating midair hundreds of meters away, and all around him, white tentacles of smoke could be seen. What the fuck is that? Kazuo thought before time rewound itself. A few minutes earlier, the real Kazuo had been leaning against the railing, watching every event unfold, when he had suddenly felt a presence behind him. Someone. Kazuo thought, but before he could even organize his thoughts completely, he felt something grab all four of his limbs in an instant, caging him and lifting him off the ground. Looking down, he saw it. It was like tentacles of smoke that had turned tangible and were now holding him in place. At this moment, a part of the smoke condensed and formed a masked face. Kazuo Hyuga, you certainly are an annoyance to our plans. If it hadn't been for you, my plans would have already been in full motion. The man spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. Madara's new puppet? Smoke? Is that his manjikyu? Kazuo thought, however, that he avoided glancing into the small mask eye holes. Before Kazuo could even do anything, the smoke figure seemed to grow an eerie smile before the smoke that had been entangling Kazuo's limbs crawled up his face and rushed inside of him through every orifice it could find. His nose, ears, mouth, and even through his eyes. Grllg. Kazuo's body quickly started inflating as an impossible amount of smoke rushed into his body before finally. Plop. His body ripped apart, bursting at the seams, organs spewing out of his abdomen. This was the moment that time had rewound itself back. The black and white world rewound, every motion turning in reverse before Kazuo was once more leaning against the railing. That fucker, that fucking hurt, you son of a bitch. Kazuo thought to himself as he quickly created a pair of paper wings, not wasting a single moment, and he flew into the air with a quick flap. It was at this moment that he heard a notification-like sound inside his head. New mission has been generated. Survive the masked man. Reward, random elemental chakra nature. Random legendary weapon. Condition, user has to complete the mission within 50 turns to claim the rewards. Failure, death. Kazuo gazed at the status panel that had appeared before his eyes before his expression changed, the corners of his mouth rose, and a devilish smile appeared on his face. Ah, never mind, I love you, masked man. Kazuo thought insidiously to himself, barely able to contain his joy as he gazed around, still on high alert even though he had been gazing at the status panel, he hadn't lost his cool at all. It was at this moment that Kazuo noticed something appearing behind him. Not wasting a single moment, he quickly flew even higher whilst at the same time making hand signs quickly before putting two fingers close to his mouth. In an instant, his chest expanded before a rush of water came out of his mouth, like a stream as it headed straight below him, where he had just been positioned before. He can transform himself into smoke. Fire could work, however, smoke is closely related to fire, and he may have the ability to use fire as well. Giving it to him right now isn't a wise choice. Water is a much safer option. Kazuo thought to himself as he continued releasing the massive stream of water towards the ground, his chakra reserves starting to get drained at an insane rate as he created the water. Usually, this would be a major waste of chakra, however, I have no choice, I need to see just how much damage a full-powered water jutsu can do to him. Kazuo thought to himself before he finally released the jutsu, lowering his fingers. Looking down below him, the entire street and buildings below him had been ruined, destroyed by the ferocious water wave, and there was no smoke-masked man in sight. The buildings and streets were completely flooded with water that was continuing to rush away from the point of impact towards other streets and inside houses and buildings. It didn't kill him, that's for sure, or I would have received the rewards for the mission. Kazuo thought as he glanced around warily. Suddenly, without any sign at all, Kazuo felt his stomach start getting bloated. What? How? Kazuo thought, however, before he could even start moving his chakra to do something, anything. Plshhh bang. His entire body burst from the inside once more, even more aggressively than before. Guts spilling everywhere and falling to the ground, the paper wings behind him quickly being covered with blood as they started dispersing. What was left of his ravaged body started falling down towards the flooded ground. Kazuo's final thoughts were as usual. "You damned ashtray." Chapter 128. Snapping his eyes open, Kazuo practically jumped out of his bed. Looking around, he found himself back on his bed inside his house. It's the start of the day once more, not 2 days earlier. This means the cycle was started from here. This is better than if it had been a 2-day cycle. Yesterday doesn't really matter. Kazuo thought to himself as he quickly started getting ready, putting on his combat gear as he usually did before every mission, before putting on another cloak on top so that he looked like he was wearing regular civilian clothing. Alright, the plan is simple. This time I'll simply use my paper illusion to head past the ninja of the Uchiha clan and copy the inscription on the tablet. The root base is still only around 30% completed in exploration, so that will have to continue, and I'll even add the clone I used at the Hokage Tower right from the start. Kazuo thought quickly as he sat down on the tatami in his office. The next part is survival against that guy. I could simply leave the village, however, after I've thought it through. Minato's survival is crucial if I want to gain as many benefits as possible in the future. Sarutobi is too much of a fox. I have 3 main objectives during this night. Kazuo thought as he took a slow deep breath before releasing it as a soft sigh. Surviving the masked ninja, the survival of Minato Namikaze, and the death of Danzo Shimura. Sarutobi would be a nice addition to the death count, however it would be close to impossible, or would it? Kazuo thought as his expression twitched slightly, his lips just so slightly tilting upwards. I have to complete all of this within 50 turns if I wish to claim the rewards of the mission. That means I don't have infinite amounts of tries as I had against Kakuzu. Kazuo thought to himself before getting up from the tatami mat and starting to walk outside. There's also the fact that I wish to gain an even better standing with Saori, however, that should be easy enough to do. I already know the location where the 9 tails will appear in the village, and I could easily use my body flicker to save her just before she dies. That should work even if it's not perfect. The impact should still be there. Kazuo thought to himself as he looked outside the window at the sun that was rising up from the horizon. Let's do this. Kazuo thought as his usual poker face finally broke, revealing a smile on his face. Nighttime quickly approached as Kazuo repeated the exact motions he had done yesterday until that point, going out with Saori, walking around, and bringing her exactly to the spot where the 9 tails would appear and cause the most chaos. 2 minutes left. Kazuo thought to himself as his hand reflexively moved towards his wrist where he had his entire weaponry sealed. What's wrong? Saori asked curiously, though her tone as always was almost completely emotionless as she turned to look at Kazuo. A bad premonition, Kazuo said softly as he looked around, acting perfectly as he twitched his right hand just so slightly, whilst starting to sweat slightly on his forehead. Bad premonition? Saori mumbled as she instantly put on a more guarded stance. It was a few moments later that it finally happened. The masked man appeared right at the edge of Kazuo's vision and slammed his hand on the ground, a large number of seals appearing on the ground, covering it completely in a circle before a large plume of smoke appeared, covering almost the entire district of the village. For a moment, the entire village was quiet, dead silent. It was like even the wildlife surrounding the village and the insects themselves had stopped. And then it hit a wild feral roar that shook the very earth and air, causing the smoke to quickly dissipate and reveal it. A giant orange fox with 9 tails that were quickly slamming toward the ground and the houses and buildings around it. One of these tails was heading straight towards Saori, who was frozen, her Byakugan activated on pure instinct, causing her to see the malevolent chakra clearly, making her body stop and freeze. Kazuo instantly moved, grabbing her waist whilst at the same time creating 2 pairs of paper angel wings on his back using paper slips that he had hidden under his clothes. With a quick flap of all 4 wings, he instantly disappeared from the location and reappeared tens of meters away in the air. However, he didn't stop as he continued moving away at high speeds, only stopping when he arrived at his previous location in the last turn, setting Saori down on the small balcony of the building. Seems like the 9 tails has broken out of the Jinchuriki. I'll go and see what I can do to help. You stay back, Kazuo said, his voice cold as he turned away from Saori to gaze at the beast. I'll come with. Sari said almost instantly. However, Kazuo merely raised a palm towards her. No, you're nowhere near strong enough. You would just be killing yourself for nothing. Don't waste village resources, and frankly, I don't want my wife to die for no reason, Kazuo replied as he turned and gave her a soft smile, his eyes warm as he looked at her. Meanwhile, his thoughts were utterly cold. His inner expression was one of boredom as he looked at her. I've been investigating the Hyuga clan from the inside, gathering more information whilst staying as silent about it as possible, and the only use these guys have is for the Tensigan, otherwise, they're just a useless clan. Kazuo thought to himself as he channeled his chakra and flapped his wings, instantly causing a gust of wind as he flew into the air toward the Nine Tails. I'll have to at least look like I'm participating in the battle, Kazuo thought, whilst at the same time making 3 paper clones that quickly headed to their own destinations. One of them headed towards the Uchiha district, heading towards the Naka shrine once more, whilst the other 2 headed towards the root base. Last time, I covered around 30% of the entire root base with 1 clone before I died. This time with 2 I should be able to cover around 60% more. If I'm a bit lucky, I'll be able to find what I want, Kazuo thought coldly as he arrived close to the Nine Tails, already seeing hundreds of shinobi launching jutsu toward it. Alright, Nine Tails, shall we try some boom boom? Kazuo thought as a wide grin appeared on his face. Chapter 129, hundreds of shinobi, mostly Jonin and special Jonin, could be seen rushing towards the Nine Tails, tens of elemental jutsu already being released towards it, whether they be fire style, water style, wind style, earth style, or lightning style. Yet none of them had any effect on the beast that was currently ravaging the village. It was as if they were trying to hurt a giant beast using toothpicks. It was at this moment that a Jonin by the name of Karaki Azuho raised his head and saw something flying in the air. It was a shinobi with what looked like angel wings attached to his back. What in the world is that? The man muttered, shocked as he saw the angel spread its wings wide. The wings themselves seemed to be growing larger and larger by the second until they completely dwarfed the human body they were attached to. At this moment the other shinobi also seemed to take notice as the fighting seemed to still for a moment. Sarutobi Hiruzen, who was already in his combat armor, rushed towards the Nine Tails with his own shinobi and paused as he gazed at the sight. So that's Kazuo, huh? Minato did tell me that he had a Kekka Jinkai. Sarutobi mused to himself before his eyes widened. Hundreds and thousands of paper slips shot out of the wings and headed directly to the Nine Tails. At first, the second they got close, the papers seemed to darken and fall down to the ground uselessly. However, this was noticed by Kazuo quickly. So, I can't get too close, still that is close enough for what I want to do, Kazuo mumbled to himself as he brought his arms together and made a tiger seal, controlling his chakra with as much precision as he could so that he would waste as little of the remaining chakra that he had after using the clones. Kazuo muttered softly, paper style, angelic barrage. The moment those words were said, the thousands of paper slips that were still rushing towards the Nine Tails stopped just before it before shining in a bright orange light. Boom boom boom. Thousands of booming sounds were heard as explosions engulfed the area. Each one was small, however, when there were thousands of them continuing over time, it created a devastating sight. The mere impact alone started sending the Nine Tails backward through buildings. However, Kazuo didn't send it in the original direction that Hiruzen had. Instead, he sent it towards the opposite, where the Sarutobi and Shimura compounds were located. I wasn't thinking, dear third. I was too caught up in the fight, Kazuo thought to himself as he barely held back a large smirk that was about to erupt on his face. The explosions continued for around an entire minute. The entire shinobi forces could only stare in pure shock at what was happening right in front of them. Before finally the explosions came to an end, the Nine Tails were now almost at the edge of the village, right in the middle of the Shimura compound. I only have around 20% of my chakra left after that, Kazuo thought to himself as he quickly grabbed a soldier pill and plopped it inside his mouth, quickly dissolving it. Lord Hokage, I don't have much chakra left, please send it the rest of the way out of the village, Kazuo announced with a chakra-enhanced voice that resounded through the entire village, clearly being heard by everyone. The smoke surrounding it finally cleared, and the Nine Tails could be seen. It had fallen over on the ground, however it was quickly getting up. Not even a single scratch on it. I didn't expect much, however I thought it would at least get a single mark, not even its fur is singed. Kazuo thought with a frown as he gazed down at the beast. Roar. An earth-shattering roar was released from the nine tails. The very ground shook as some of the half-collapsed buildings near it collapsed entirely at the mere air pressure released from the roar. It was at this moment that the third Hokage appeared, his bow staff in hand as he ran towards the beast. His expression seemed distraught, however he didn't stop as he enlarged the Enma staff before firmly attacking the nine tails in the abdomen, using immense force and firmly dragging it out of the village, causing even more destruction in the process. Ah, I feel sorry for the Shimura compound. Wait, I actually don't. Kazuo thought in pure joy as he flew towards the Hokage. Sir Hokage, Minato is currently fighting a masked shinobi, the one who released the nine tails. We will need you to use the Reaper Death Seal after Minato finishes dealing with the ninja to seal the beast back inside the Jinchuriki. Kazuo announced as soon as he was close enough. He doesn't have the time to verify that Minato told me this information, and it is truly helpful for the village for him to use the jutsu instead of Minato. However, in this way Naruto wouldn't get the nine tails. I'll see this to the end today, and if Kushina can really hold the entirety of the nine tails again, then I'll have to reset. I'd rather Kushina die than not have Naruto at his full power. Kazuo thought to himself as he felt his chakra starting to regenerate from using the soldier pill. Minato already prepared everything for a case like this? He was always one to think ahead. Sarutobi replied as he looked at the nine tails that had now once more gotten on his feet and was preparing another attack. This time it was a tailed beast bomb. Well, I hope he prepared for this, because if not, stop, that thing will destroy the entire village, Lord Hokage, Kazuo replied, his voice turning almost terrified and worried as he looked at the massive black ball of chakra being gathered in front of the nine tails giant maw. His voice acting had reached almost perfection at this point. His body reacted just how he wanted it to as well, even sweat starting to go down his jaw. Turning his head towards the Hokage mountain, Kazuo didn't see Minato. Did I rush it too quickly? Causing the nine tails to charge this attack before Minato managed to defeat the masked Uchiha? Kazuo must to himself inwardly with a sigh as he turned his gaze back towards the Biju Dama that was now complete and ready to be released towards them. Fuck! That was the only thought Kazuo had before the bomb was released towards them. There was no stopping it. Even if they did, the impact zone would be too large and they would be caught in it. At the moment, the only ones here with the capability to survive were Hiruzen and Kazuo, however neither would gain much from it. A failed turn. Kazuo thought as the bomb arrived at his location. He didn't even try to dodge as it engulfed him, practically disintegrating his body in a split second. Chapter 130, Kazuo's eyes snapped open once more. Time had rewound itself back to the start of the day once more. Opening his system panel, he quickly looked at the mission details, and there it was. Remaining turns to claim rewards, 49/50ths. Alright, so it didn't count the turn before I got the mission. I knew as much as it showed 50 turns in the previous one, however this is just confirmation. Kazuo thought as he released a soft sigh of relief before quickly hopping out of bed once more. The rest of the day continued just the same as before. He got ready, brought Saori to the specific location where the nine tails would attack, and then proceeded to save her from the danger. Now floating in the air in front of the giant beast once more, his thoughts like a tornado inside his mind as he calculated all possible ways that he could overcome this wall. 2 soldier pills, that should allow me to regenerate all of my chakra quickly enough that I can continue the bombardment for much longer, stopping the nine tails from releasing the Biju Dama before Minato arrives. However, it will leave me severely exhausted and practically a standing target to the masked ninja. Still, it's worth a shot. I've still got enough turns left for the mission. Kazuo thought to himself quickly before plopping 2 soldier pills inside his mouth. The pills quickly dissolved and his chakra practically erupted moments later, refilling quickly and not stopping. If he didn't start expending it soon, he could die from the pills themselves. Raising his hands wide once more, Kazuo launched the same jutsu he had in the previous turn, as he made the tiger seal. Paper style, angelic barrage, Kazuo muttered as the sound of explosions started once more. He used the same amount as before, and stopped, asking the third Hokage to do the same thing that he had in the previous turn. As soon as the beast had fallen outside the village, and before it could launch the Biju Dama again, Kazuo raised his hands once more and launched the barrage. Boom boom boom. The explosions continued for much longer this time, almost 1.5 minutes of a continuous barrage. Kazuo knew that he was doing no damage to the beast, however, he only needed time, and he had no need to actually damage it. Finally, after 97 seconds of continuous bombardment, Kazuo's hands fell down. He looked exhausted, real sweat going down the side of his head into his jaw, dripping down from the air onto the ground, his hands shaking slightly from the large use of chakra and then the quick regeneration and expenditure of it. The cloud of smoke quickly cleared itself out, the 9 tails doing so easily with merely a simple roar and a swish of its tails. The area around it, the entire forest was on fire from the explosions, however it was nothing compared to what the beast did in merely seconds with just its physical force alone, without even trying. Its maw opened, directed right towards Kazuo and the third Hokage as well as the Hidden Leaf Village. Hundreds of small red and blue orbs gather into the air and combine together, starting to form a singular giant black ball of chakra. Another Biju Dama. I swear Minato, if you aren't here yet, fucking yellow flash, as if. You're always fucking late. Kazuo thought to himself in annoyance as he gasped for breath, his paper wings starting to dissolve as he lowered himself toward the ground. Lord Third, do you have any jutsu capable of stopping that? Kazuo asked, his voice urgent despite the fact that inwardly he wasn't under any real panic. This turn had been gambled, and if it worked, then it did. If it didn't, he could simply try again. No, this is bad, Hiruzen muttered as he prepared his bow staff, planning on hitting the tailed beast bomb before it was launched. At least in this way it would explode outside the village and the resulting detonation would cause the least amount of damage to the village itself. Kazuo, run away as quickly as you can, Hiruzen spoke loudly as he gritted his teeth. Is this old fart actually planning to sacrifice himself? Sorry, but I need you alive for something else, you old fuck. Kazuo thought to himself as he released a sigh. Pressing 2 fingers to his wrist, he quickly unsealed a singular kunai. A 3-pronged one, and threw it right in the ground in front of them, pushing chakra into the Thunder God seal inside it. Come here, you yellow Pikachu. Kazuo thought to himself, and thankfully for once his prayers, or rather his curses, were answered. In a flash of yellow light, the 4th Hokage Minato Namikaze teleported right in front of them. Sensei, can you stop that thing? Kazuo asked quickly. He already knew he could, however there were only 2 known times when the man had done it. Once during the attack with the giant seal at the Hokage Mountain, and the next time in the 4th Shinobi World War for the 10 Tails, however that had been after he had fully mastered 9 Tails chakra mode already. The chakra needed is too large without a seal already prepared for it. The only one I have is at the Hokage Mountain. I need you both to start channeling chakra into the seals that will appear in the air in front of you. Minato spoke quickly as he started forming hand seals at a speed almost invisible to the eye, his hand blurring. Kazuo and Hiruzen didn't hesitate even for a single second as they quickly body flickered right next to Minato and made the basic hand seal, circulating their chakra already. In a flash, just before the Biju Dama could be released fully, a ginormous circular seal appeared in front of them with 3 smaller circles. Each smaller seal circle was placed in front of one of them. Minato, Hiruzen, and Kazuo. Taking out another soldier pill, Kazuo quickly ate it before starting to pour his entire chakra reserves into it. His chakra reserves were still much lower than Kage-level ninjas like Hiruzen and Minato, however using a soldier pill, he had countered this by increasing his chakra regeneration to unnatural levels, to the point that he already knew his addiction would be coming back worse than ever. Fuck, I suffered so much with that damn addiction once already. Kazuo thought, however he didn't stop infusing his chakra into the seal. The Biju Dama was finally launched towards them, hitting the seal directly in the middle and bending space itself as it slowly but surely engulfed and disappeared into the seal. Chapter 131, the Biju Dama was finally released. It shot towards the 3 of them at high speeds before abruptly being stopped by the seal midair. The very space started bending, engulfing the black orb of death slowly but surely, before finally it completely engulfed the orb, leaving behind only the shimmering seal midair. Minato quickly formed another hand seal with a Thunder God kunai in his hands. Instantly the seal in the air vanished, and after around 2 seconds, a few kilometers away, a massive explosion occurred, blinding light into the night. And a few more seconds later, intense winds went through the entire village and the location where they were. Minato, bring Kushina here, I will seal the 9 tails back into her. Hiruzen quickly announced as he started forming hand seals. Minato gave a quick nod before vanishing once more, reappearing with Kushina and a small baby in his hands. I'll help with the seals, seal half of it inside Kushina and half into Naruto, Minato spoke quickly as he started forming his own hand signs. Kushina looked ready to die, her usual rosy complexion had turned ashen, Kazuo could even sense her chakra starting to wither more and more as time passed. So that's what happens when a Jinchuriki gets their tailed beast stolen. Kazuo thought to himself as he looked at the red-haired woman before turning his gaze back to Hiruzen, who stared. Snake, boar, ram, rabbit, dog, rat, bird, horse, snake. 8 hand seals in total, completed in less than a second. For a moment, Kazuo didn't notice anything, and neither did he sense any of Hiruzen's chakra being used. That was only for a moment, however, as a moment later he felt it. He couldn't see the Reaper, however. Goosebumps appeared all over his skin. It was like he was facing death itself. It was a similar sensation to when he had met that Reaper inside his dreams, or whatever that place was when he had died. This thing. It's one of the only things that could actually kill me in a way that even the time reversal wouldn't be able to stop. Kazuo thought as his hands clenched. He took a few steps back. The 9 tails seemed to have already realized what was happening as they roared and got prepared to launch another attack. Minato was too busy with his own sealing. He had already summoned an altar and placed Naruto on top of it, whilst he himself continued to make hand seals. Kushina was in no way able to fight at the moment, and Hiruzen was doing the Reaper death seal, making him unable to move. The only one left was Kazuo. Fuck! Kazuo thought as he turned towards the 9 tails that had already armed towards the group, preparing to crush them or slice them apart with its claws. You son of a bitch, can't you just fucking stay still? It was at this moment that 3 figures appeared, something Kazuo hadn't expected. Kakashi, Rin, and Obito. Obito instantly moved to the front, his eye already bleeding as they turned into the Manjikyu Sharingan. His chakra levels were drained insanely quickly as a Sharingan pattern appeared on the 9-tailed eyes. You bastards, where were you the previous turns? Kazuo thought to himself. Rin's body was already being covered in a bubbly red chakra coat. Kakashi was next to her, a Chidori already prepared for any danger. You're late. Are you taking Sensei's bad habits? Kazuo muttered to them as he plopped down onto the ground. There was nothing left that he had to do. He couldn't help with the sealing with his measly skills, and he didn't need to worry about the masked ninja with everyone around him. Or at least that's what he thought. At the same time that this was happening, on the other side of the village, deep underground, his 2 clones were still running through the root base, killing anything and anyone they found. They had already combed through 90% of the base when they finally found it. In the main room, the 2 quickly entered inside. The clones were both wearing white masks and assassin clothing as they walked into a large hall. At the top of it stood the man they were here for, and on both sides of him stood tens of Anbu. Shimura Danzo, Kazuo spoke, his voice deathly calm as he walked unhurried toward the middle of the room together with the other clone. Kazuo Hyuga. I knew that you would become a problem. I should have taken you out personally, instead of sending useless tools. It was a miscalculation on my part. A mistake that I will fix. Danzo spoke as he looked at Kazuo, with eyes that promised death. Kill me? Are you capable? Old fart still thinks he's the shit, huh? Kazuo asked as he ripped the mask off his face. It was clear that the man had already registered his chakra signature before. There was no need to hide anymore. Danzo's face scrunched up as he raised his hand. In an instant 30 rude shinobi rushed towards the 2 clones. I really hope you have the Izanagi even this early on. It would be too quick if things ended this way. Kazuo spoke just before the shinobi arrived before him. At his words, Danzo's eyes widened. In a flash, both the clones unraveled, turning into hundreds of papers. On these papers were small inventory seals. Chakra instantly activated them and the hundreds of papers turned into tens of thousands, quickly engulfing the entire room as they swerved in the air before they all heard it. The sizzling sound of an explosion tag, yet it wasn't just one but rather tens of thousands of the same sound. They all detonated at the exact same time, creating one singular extreme explosion. On top of the hidden root base, a forest stood. One moment it was calm, or as calm as it could be during the night of the Nine-Tails attack. In the next moment, the ground erupted in bright light. It was an explosion around a tenth of the Biju Dama, however even that was enough to erase everything in the vicinity, leaving nothing more than a large crater spanning tens of meters, close to 100 in diameter. Chapter 132. On the other side of the village, back at the sealing altar, Minato had finally finished his hand seals. The third Hokage raised his hand and in an instant, the soul of the Nine-Tails was grabbed by the invisible Reaper, before being split into two parts, one part being directed towards Kushina, who had similarly been laid down onto an altar, as well as Naruto. In an instant, a searing, almost boiling sound was heard as a seal appeared on both Kushina's and Naruto's bellies, practically being burned onto their skin. Naruto instantly started wailing whilst Kushina grit her teeth and suppressed a scream of her own. For a moment after, only the Naruto's wailing was heard before Hiruzen fell on his knees. "Lord Third," Minato quickly said as he held the man from falling down completely face first onto the ground. "I'd have let him eat dirt." Kazuo thought to himself as he looked at the scene of Minato slowly and carefully laying the dying Hokage onto the ground. His soul is being siphoned, and he doesn't show any physical damage, however his chakra is being sucked at an insane rate, or is it that it's just disappearing? After all, chakra is a combination of physical and mental, and the soul holds the entire mental capacity of a person, meaning that as his soul disappears, the chakra is being lost as well? Kazuo thought to himself curiously as he watched the scene. It was at this moment, when no one expected it, that white pearly smoke appeared all around them in an instant, engulfing the zone. Minato instantly got on high alert, stepping closer to Kushina and Naruto. Obito, Rin, and Kakashi stepped closer to each other, each of them prepared to fight. The third was already dead, and the only one vulnerable at the moment was Kazuo. "Ah, this fuck," Kazuo thought, already knowing what was going to happen. However, he had no chakra left, and using another soldier pill was suicide. The smoke didn't allow even the Manjikyu to see through, and it stopped all kinds of sensing, so everyone was in the blind when it rushed directly inside of Kazuo. "I feel violated," Kazuo thought to himself as his body started expanding once more. The process was gruesome and utterly harrowingly painful. Plop! Another shower of blood, flesh, and organs was created as Kazuo's body exploded from the inside. The smoke quickly cleared after, letting the others regain their sight, only to be met with the scene of Kazuo's head and legs and whatever remained of his torso and abdomen. For a moment, no one spoke. Their eyes widened before Rin released a piercing scream that was stopped halfway by the world itself turning black and white and starting to rewind itself. Seconds turned back first before it became minutes and finally hours, until it was the dawn of the same day once more and Kazuo's eyes snapped open on his bed at home. Turns left, 48/50ths. Son of a bitch, I was so fucking close to winning. Kazuo thought in pure annoyance as he got up from his bed and quickly completed his morning kata, getting his body ready for combat and then wearing his combat garments and hiding them under civilian clothes. Okay, fuck, let's start planning a bit more. First of all, I don't actually need to get that Uchiha tablet inscription, at least not tonight. I can get it at a later date. Second, since I have 48 turns left, I can try to get the Nine-Tails flesh, or I could try and catch the bastards who stole the chakra. I think it was a movie or something. This boy called Sora was given it. That would actually be the most useful. Next, I already know where Danzo is. I got the information as soon as the clones dispelled themselves. I'll still send 2 clones, however only use one for the detonation and leave the other outside to see if the guy used the Izanagi. I have to make sure he dies. Kazuo thought as he fastened his arm guards on. The last problem is, how do I get enough chakra that I won't be vulnerable to that guy? No, I can't get any more chakra. Maybe if I just stay closer to Minato or the 3 others? Kazuo thought to himself with a soft hum before nodding. That could work, Kazuo muttered softly under his breath with a sigh as he opened his status menu. Stats. Name, Kazuo. Race, human. Affiliation, Hidden Leaf Village. Age, 13. Strength, A. Endurance, B. Agility, A. Intelligence, B+. Charisma, A. Chakra, B. Skills. Time Loop, Rank 3. Minato Taijutsu, 10 out of 10. Advanced Shuriken Jutsu, 9 out of 10. Advanced Kenjutsu, 4/10, 5/10. Beginner Fuin Jutsu, 7 out of 10. Paper Clone, 10 out of 10. Paper God Technique, 10 out of 10. Paper Illusion, 10 out of 10. Paper Shuriken, 10/10. Shunshin / Body Flicker Jutsu, 10 out of 10. Hiding Like a Mole Technique, 10 out of 10. Ean Release, Mind Exhaustion, 8 out of 10. Ean Release, Mind Break, 7 out of 10. Water Release, Severing Water Wave, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Bullet, 10 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Wall, 9 out of 10. No big changes besides Severing Waves being fully mastered, most likely when I used it to flood the streets, and Kenjutsu is slightly higher, probably from all the root shinobi. Kazuo thought to himself, finding no obvious solution in his status menu either. Unless, it's been a while since I've used this technique. It's cowardly, but who the fuck cares? Kazuo thought as his lips curled upwards. Hours later, Kazuo had followed his previous turn almost completely. Finally, the sealing of the 9 tails was completed just like before, and Kazuo had even conserved chakra, having not used the clone to go to the Uchiha compound. He had also completely destroyed the root base, and now one clone was stationed there in hiding, waiting to see if Danzo was going to use his Anaji. The smoke once more covered the area. Kazuo didn't hesitate for a single moment. He stealthily made a hand seal and instantly headed under the ground. Earth Release, Hiding Like a Mole Technique. And at the same time, he had released paper sheets into the air where he had been. Paper Style, Paper Illusion. He didn't have enough chakra for a clone, however he had enough to create an illusion of himself, and he knew that the paper illusion worked even against the Sharingan. The Kazuo underground was continuing to swim through the underground as fast as he could towards the root base where his paper clone was. Chapter 133, running as fast as he could, whilst using his chakra as efficiently as possible. Kazuo practically swam through the underground at high speeds, around Chunin level speeds when above ground. The ground parted before him as he moved forward, whilst the parted ground behind him turned into mush and once more closed the gaps of where he had moved through, leaving no tunnel that led back towards his location. Good, with this, he shouldn't be able to get to me unless he is a sensor. However, Minato is already there, and he's not in a bad position. He should be able to lock onto the enemy and begin a fight, unless he thinks that leading the rest, and especially Kushina and Naruto, there would be too dangerous. And in this case, the enemy clearly has some kind of grudge against me, or at least they consider me dangerous enough that I shouldn't be left alive. Kazuo thought in annoyance as he once more realized that he hadn't actually escaped. Arriving outside the village walls, Kazuo could no longer maintain the chakra expenditure as he jumped out of the ground and directly landed on a tree branch. His body was covered in cold sweat, not from fear or emotions, simply from the overexpenditure and quick forced regeneration of chakra reserves. This is bad. I need to use the chakra pills if I want to win the battle. However, the chakra used is too high, so I end up like this. On the brink of death. Kazuo thought, annoyed as he spat out a glob of blood and cleaned his lip with the back of his hand. Fuck. 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 It's been a while since I've been this annoyed. Since I killed that hairy fuck Kakuzu. Kazuo muttered under his breath as he released a shuddered breath before taking a deep inhale and calming himself. It's at this moment that he clearly saw the mist, or rather fog, coming towards him from the sky. So you're here. Who exactly are you? Kazuo asked, no longer bothering to even fight. he didn't have the strength or chakra needed to currently escape the enemy, and so the best situation was to gather as much strength as he could before dying. The fog actually stopped for a moment before starting to coagulate together as it started forming a human body. It was clearly a man with a spiral mask on and a black cloak. They looked exactly the same as Obito had back in the anime. So it's a new Toby with techniques that are somehow more annoying than Obito. At least Minato was able to make Obito unable to move after that single clash, but this damn guy, he's still capable enough to chase me to my death. Kazuo thought to himself as he released a calming sigh and looked at the man directly. Why exactly are you coming after me? Kazuo asked. His tone of voice was light and perfectly controlled, as if he was talking with a leaf villager instead of a Kage-level ninja who clearly was out for his blood. Me? Well, you could call me Madara Uchiha. The man said, his voice deep as he took a step towards Kazuo. Madara Uchiha my ass. You think Madara would have even needed the 9 tails to destroy the leaf? Kazuo thought to himself. However, on the outside, his facial expression changed to one of pure shock. You do know that you have no chances of surviving this. I, however, have a use for you. Join my organization. Kazuo Hyuga. The masked man said, as he now stood before Kazuo, letting him clearly see the swirling Manjikyu Sharingan in the man's eyes. It was at this moment that Kazuo heard a ding-like notification sound inside his mind. Ding! User has been offered a recruitment offer from Madara of the Akatsuki. Rewards, title, Akatsuki member, S-rank elemental jutsu, elemental affinity of choosing, completion of bloodline mission. Penalties, heart seal, enmity with village hidden in the leaves, Rouge ninja status, loss of all relations with the Hyuga clan. Hokage path locked. It was at this moment that the outside world lost all color, the wind stopped moving, the sounds of screams and fire stopped at the same time. It was unnatural. It was a complete time stop. It was clear that the choice before Kazuo was determined to be a major choice that couldn't be skipped over. I could just do the reset and grab the bonus, couldn't I? Just like back then with the root mission. Kazuo thought to himself with a smirk, however, it quickly got erased from his mind. At the end of the system notification, there was a small line of words that completely crushed his fantasy. Choosing to accept will move the user's last time checkpoint to this moment. This is clearly a death sentence. I can't do anything but accept the offer if I want to survive. That means the only way to refuse is to refuse right now. Because if I accept it even once, I'm screwed into accepting it. Kazuo thought to himself as his mind whirred with thoughts. He wasn't angry, nor was he particularly displeased with the choice. He was calmly thinking about whether or not the benefits of being an Akatsuki member were worth it. The Hokage was never my goal, so that isn't that big of a major loss, and at the same time, for the next 12 years, there really won't be anything crazy happening in the Leaf Village, so the chances for me to grow stronger will be far and few. And it's not like I can never return to the hidden Leaf Village. Orochimaru did, and so did Sasuke. And I clearly have a connection to the Hokage path just like they both did. Kazuo thought as he finally came to a decision. Time started to move once more as the world regained its colors. I accept. Chapter 134, the world gained color and life once more as the movement of time restarted itself. Kazuo himself was looking at the self-proclaimed Madara Uchiha behind the mask for a few moments. He had just proclaimed his agreement to join the Akatsuki. You will be contacted later on. The man spoke, his voice was clearly augmented, at least Kazuo thought so. It wasn't a clear augmentation, and he clearly sounded like a regular man. However, that voice he was using was something he remembered very clearly. It was a specific voice that nobody could forget. I wonder how he was able to perfectly match his voice to Madara's real one. Kazuo thought to himself, but he quickly discarded the thoughts. The masked man was disappearing quickly before his eyes, his body transforming into fog that was quickly being scattered into thin air. However, even that wasn't what Kazuo was currently focused on. No, it was the notifications that were appearing before his very eyes in the form of blue holographic panels. Ding! User has joined the Akatsuki. Ding! User has declared himself an enemy of Konoha. Ding! This information is currently hidden from the rest of the world. Thus, some rewards will be withheld until the user is publicly acknowledged as a member. Rewards withheld. Title: Akatsuki member, S-rank rogue ninja. Ding! The rest of the rewards are being created and will be handed to the user shortly. Ding! User has been given S-rank elemental jutsu, random, elemental affinity of choosing. Bloodline mission forcible completion. Kazuo couldn't help himself any longer, his lips curved up quickly as a look of pure joy appeared on his face. He felt almost giddy and overwhelmed by the sight before him. However, even that joy was quick to leave him and be replaced by something else. Something much less pleasant. It started quickly. It was like one moment he felt fine, and in the very next second, his body was burning up from the inside, like his veins had been lit on fire and his blood had turned into molten lava. His muscles spasmed constantly as he fell to the ground, a complete trembling, shaking mess. He couldn't even scream, his throat muscles were completely useless. That was only the physical aspect, however, and something he wouldn't have really minded. No, what was truly damning was something else. Kazuo's eyes had turned orange with a clock symbol in them. Just like they were when he was using the vision ability. However, this time, it felt different. Instead of time stopping and reversing, it was as if time had slowed. Or it might have been only his perception of time that had increased by leaps and bounds, and this caused the torture he was experiencing. On the outside, to anyone else, Kazuo had only experienced a few seconds of pain. However, to Kazuo himself, it was more than 6 months. 6 months of being stuck in constant, ending harrowing pain worse than anything he had ever felt, and Kazuo had quite the long list of creative ways he had died in, from disembowelment all the way to pure explosions. Fuck, is it over? Kazuo thought as he felt the pain disappear. It felt like a void, he didn't even dare move, his body was completely unresponsive. His chakra was in complete disarray, or what little remained of it after he had spent it almost completely. This is bad, I need to survive, need to quickly get medical attention. If I return to the past, I might have to do that shit again. Move. Fucking move. Kazuo thought to himself as he released his first grunt of pain outwardly, using every part of his will to command his body. However, it remained unresponsive. At most, his finger twitched slightly. Kazuo could feel it, his limbs losing their strength gradually but surely, his vision starting to darken at the same time. Chakra deprivation was quickly setting in, and in his current state, fainting would most likely mean death. It was at this moment that he once more heard it, after what had felt to him like 6 long, grueling months. Ding! User's bloodline has been partially activated. User has gained another ability. Time loop skill has leveled up. User has gained the Eye of Time Kekka Jinkai. The Eye of Time abilities are heavily suppressed as the user's bloodline activation is still too low. Eye of Time, Dojutsu. Abilities. Time Stop, current limit, 0.1 seconds. Time Skip, locked. Time Slow, locked. Time Break, locked. How the fuck is a time stop for 0.1 seconds going to help me survive, you useless fucking system? You piece of shit. Kazuo thought as his head started lolling to the side and his eyelids finally fully closed. He had fainted. On the other side of the village, Kazuo's shadow clone had been standing guard at the root base, making sure that the old man hadn't survived using his Inagi. He shouldn't be able to revive himself now, right? Has enough time passed? Kazuo's shadow clone thought to itself before it felt it, the change in his abilities, as he quickly opened the status menu. What the fuck? How did my main body complete the bloodline mission? The shadow clone thought, however, his mind was quickly snapped back into seriousness as he felt movement down below. There it was, like a mirage or a dream, Danzo's body was being woven into reality right in front of Kazuo's eyes. Well, there isn't a better time than this to give this a go. Kazuo thought as he snapped his eyes open and forced chakra towards them, the color quickly changing to a vibrant yellowish orange whilst a clock replaced his pupils. Sending chakra to his limbs, Kazuo quickly performed a body flicker jutsu whilst at the same time using the time stop. The world stopped for but 0.1 seconds. However, Kazuo had kept moving at insane speeds whilst the world had been frozen. In the end, creating a teleportation effect, one moment Kazuo had been much farther away, and in the next, he had already appeared before Danzo, who had no way to even react as his neck was cleanly sliced through with Kazuo's tanto. Chapter 135, Status. Name, Kazuo Hyuga. Affiliation, Akatsuki, Hidden. Race, Human. Age, 13. Stats. Strength, A. Endurance, B. Agility, A. Intelligence, B+. Charisma, A. Chakra, B. Chakra affinities. Water, 10 out of 10. In, 10/10. Skills. Time loop, rank 3. Eye of Time, Dojutsu, rank 1. Minato Taijutsu, 10 out of 10. Advanced Shuriken Jutsu, 10 out of 10. Advanced Kenjutsu, 5/10. Beginner Fuin Jutsu, 7 out of 10. Paper Clone, 10 out of 10. Paper God Technique, 10 out of 10. Paper Illusion, 10 out of 10. Paper Shuriken, 10/10. Shunshin/Body Flicker Jutsu, 10 out of 10. Hiding Like a Mole Technique, 10 out of 10. In Release, Mind Exhaustion, 8 out of 10. In Release, Mind Break, 8 out of 10. Water Release, Severing Water Wave, 10 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Bullet, 10 out of 10. Water Release, Enhanced Water Wall, 10/10. Unlocking Reward, Random Chakra Affinity. Lightning Chakra Affinity gained. Max. Looking at the status menu, Kazuo's shadow clone didn't hesitate even for a split second as he used his 2 other gains from the system, one of which he had saved specifically for this reason. Using Chakra Affinity Chooser. Earth Chakra Nature has been chosen, Max. Using Elemental Kekka Janaki Creator Point. Combining Earth and Lightning Chakra Natures. Explosion Kekka Jinkai has been obtained. Kazuo looked at the status window and couldn't help himself. He laughed, a pure, unbridled laugh that echoed through the barren landscape still smoking after his earlier explosive decimation of the root base. Danzo's headless corpse is lying at his feet. However, he was interrupted mid-laugh as his shadow clone's body ran out of all chakra, and he popped away into smoke. Meanwhile, all over the Leaf Village, hundreds of shinobi were rushing to buildings, towards the screams of the people buried in them or towards their own houses, only to find their loved ones had died, being brutally killed by the rage of the Nine Tails. Hundreds of meters away, on the outside of the village walls where the Nine Tails had last been seen, the smog had finally fully cleared. Obito, Minato, Kushina, Kakashi, Rin, and the small Naruto were there. Naruto was now in Kushina's arms, the woman having finally regained a bit of her vitality after getting half of the Nine Tails back inside of her. "Where's Kazuo?" Kakashi questioned as he looked around, but found no sign of his teammate. "He ran away underground earlier. He's towards the north, likely unconscious. His chakra is completely depleted." Minato replied after a moment, having closed his eyes to focus on his chakra sensing technique. "Right." Obito and Kakashi, together with Rin, quickly nodded as they swung into action, using the body flicker jutsu to quickly head towards the location Minato had pointed at. They arrived there in a mere minute and saw Kazuo lying on the grass, barely breathing. His body looked damaged from the inside, his nose bleeding. Internal damage. Rin thought instantly as she crouched down and brought her palm over Kazuo, and started using an adjusted medical palm jutsu. Because she had become a sort of bonded-tailed beast herself, her chakra was usually corrosive. However, after much trial and error, she had managed to create a new jutsu for herself that used the tailed beast's chakra to regenerate instead of harming the body. Because the chakra itself was much more powerful in quality than regular, this had caused a significant increase in her medical abilities. "His entire insides are damaged, it's like an explosion happened inside of them," Rin muttered to herself, her words betraying her shock despite her calm and focused facade. You think it was that masked man? Kakashi asked as he kept looking around for anything or anyone. Most likely. Be careful, he could still be around. Obito replied, his Manjikyu Sharingan already out and scanning the surroundings. After a few minutes, Rin raised her hand towards Kazuo's head as she started scanning it with another jutsu. The head of a shinobi was much more delicate, the brain had a lot more delicate chakra pathways that could be harmed much more easily. She was planning on simply scanning it and using the medical healing jutsu, however, what she found froze her, her hand shaking slightly as her eyes widened. This. His chakra near his eyes, the pathways are enlarged. As if he has a dojutsu. Rin muttered to herself in shock. What? Both Kakashi and Obito said aloud, shock similarly coloring their voice. Rin shook her head slightly, deciding to concentrate once more on the task of actually healing Kazuo, deciding to deal with this piece of information later. Could it be that the man put him in a Jinjutsu instead? Or something similar? Kakashi asked as he sat down on a nearby piece of rock. No, that wouldn't cause such big changes to his chakra pathways unless it's a Jinjutsu of such a level that it actually rewrites his entire memories. We'll have to wait for him to wake up to find out more definitively. Rin replies as she releases a sigh of exhaustion. The concentration needed to heal Kazuo with Tailed Beast chakra was much higher than with her own past chakra. Chapter 136, 3 days later, inside a secluded part of the half-rebuilt Konoha Hospital, Kazuo Hyuga was lying on a hospital bed unconscious. Even after 3 days had passed, he had yet to awake from his coma. The large expenditure and overuse of military chakra pills and the forceful activation of his dojutsu had caused a complete mess of his chakra system as well as his physical body. Meanwhile, whilst he was in a coma, the world didn't stop, in fact, it moved quickly. The broken-down Konoha had already started rebuilding itself, the roads and parts of the village were still damaged, however, construction was quickly ongoing to fix all structural issues. Civilians who had lost their houses had been evacuated to a part of the village where they had been given tents to live in whilst their houses were being reconstructed. A process that was much quicker than in Kazuo's past world. Here, shinobi had much greater physical prowess and tired much less than regular civilians, and in this situation, they were being used as construction forces instead of simply using civilians. Most would think of it as a waste of military manpower, however, Minato thought otherwise. Konoha had to maintain the image of the strongest of the 5 great villages, meaning that they had to always appear unaffected, even when disaster had struck them. The night of the nine-tailed attack had been a massacre, they had lost more than 100 Jonin-level shinobi, that was the real loss, not the civilian deaths and not the structural damage done to the village. Buildings could be rebuilt, however, training a Jonin-level ninja was much harder and required more than a little bit of luck. Sitting inside the Hokage office, Minato was currently facing the last 2 remaining elders of the village. Sarutobi Hiruzen has died in battle and sacrificed his life, and it was later found out that Danzo Shimura had similarly been killed, and the entire root base had been completely annihilated by an unknown enemy on the same night. Minato, have you found out anything yet about the attacker? Hamiramito Kato, as he sat on the couch facing Minato. No, there's been nothing yet. They appeared out of nowhere whilst Kushina was giving birth, right at the moment when the nine-tailed seal is at its weakest, and managed to grab Kushina before I could stop him. He disappeared just as quickly. His abilities themselves were quite strange, and I have never heard of any known shinobi using similar abilities. Minato replied as he shook his head, a serious expression on his face. It wasn't the fact that he was standing before the elders. Minato frankly didn't care much about their opinions. However, even after days of racking his brain, he still couldn't figure out 3 things. How did Fugaku not know the existence of a Manjikyu Sharingan user? How did the intel of the location of Kushina's birth get leaked? And finally, just what happened to Kazuo? Minato thought to himself as he raised a hand and rubbed his forehead. Has Fugaku said anything? Everyone clearly saw the Sharingan pattern on the Nine-Tails' eyes. They are clearly suspicious. Koharu Udatane interjected at this moment, her face scrunching up in distaste at the mere fact that she had to utter an Uchiha's name. No, Fugaku has no idea either. There isn't any Uchiha who currently possesses the Manjikyu Sharingan inside the clan. The only likely possibility is that it's a Uchiha from outside the village. And that in and of itself poses a lot more danger than if it were simply a defected Konoha Uchiha clansman. Minato replied as he shook his head at her. Minato Namikaze wasn't Sarutobi Hiruzen. He didn't bear the same unjustified hatred towards the Uchiha as his Hokage predecessor. If he had, then this talk would have developed much more differently, and the Uchiha might have already been excluded from the village or even charged as traitors of the village already. What interests me more, however, is that Danzo, whilst now dead, did something quite interesting before his death. Half of the root forces were found near the Uchiha clan compound, and Fugaku told me that they had been told that, by order of the Hokage, they were not allowed to leave their clan grounds and participate in the battle against the Nine Tails. This almost feels like Danzo knew of the upcoming attack. Thankfully, his head was intact when we found him, and I have ordered the Yamanaka head of clan to use any means necessary to extract all and any information from him. Minato said as he showed a soft smile that almost hid the sheer coldness emanating from him and his chakra and mere presence as he gazed at the two elders, who suddenly went still. You can't do this, desecrating an elder's body. This is pure disrespect. Minato, Danzo was a war hero. Hamura instantly says as he rises up from his seated position. I do not care. The village has suffered a lot of damage from that night. I will reach the end of this, and I will eradicate any and all threats to the village. That is my duty as the Hokage. Minato replied, no longer even showing that cold smile, his expression a facade of glacial ice. You shouldn't be doing this. Minato! Koharu said, outraged herself as she similarly stood up, her hands shaking frantically, her eyes wide. You two were close acquaintances of Shimura Danzo. The guards will escort you back to your residences. As of this moment until further notice, you aren't allowed to leave your quarters. Minato replied instead, completely ignoring their words as he simply motioned with his hand. At the same moment of his hand moving, two Umbu appeared before the elders in a flash. One bore a white hawk mask with white spiky hair, whilst the other had a fox mask with black spiked short hair. The two Umbu quickly motioned for the elders to move, offering no warmth, following orders coldly. Chapter 137. Hours passed, the sun slowly setting down on the Konoha village, orange light shining through the trees and hitting inside the almost completely ruined Uchiha compound that was slowly but surely being repaired. Two shinobi were having a meeting. Fugaku Uchiha and Minato Namikaze, the Uchiha Patriarch and the Hokage. So, have you found any possible leads to the masked man? Minato asked, his face donning a serious expression unlike his usual carefree one. None. All Uchiha shinobi are usually documented because of dojutsu. However, there isn't a single one that has gone unaccounted for, at least since Konoha was founded. There are records of the warring clan's era, however, they are mostly gone and eroded. It's most definitely someone out of the Uchiha clan here in Konoha. Fugaku replied whilst holding an equally, if not even more serious expression than Minato. A Sharingan user outside of the Uchiha clan was a huge deal. It meant that their bloodline had been leaked. It was a matter of life and death to the Uchiha clan as a whole, something they would never let go or allow. I see. Well then, I'll get going. I heard my student had awoken. Let me know if you find anything. Minato spoke as he gave a court nod to Fugaku, who returned before Minato dispelled his shadow clone self. Being the Hokage, especially in a time like this, meant that he had no time to even leave his post, and thus, for anything that he had to do, he had to send shadow clones instead, leaving him almost completely drained the entire time. Meanwhile, on the other side of the village, around half an hour ago, in the Konoha hospital, a certain shinobi woke up from his coma. Kazuo Hyuga. Opening his eyes, Kazuo was first blinded by the white lights of the hospital room, causing pain to shoot into his eyes for a few moments before he slowly adapted. I survived? Kazuo thought as he slowly tried to raise his body up, managing to do so slowly before surveying the room that he had woken up in. It was a private room in the Konoha hospital, usually reserved for high-ranking shinobi or special VIP personnel like the civilian council members. I guess being the Hokage's student does have some pretty nice perks. Too bad they're most likely going to be gone soon. TCH. I have to make sure to get as many rewards as possible from the village and steal as many jutsu as I can before they find out, or I have to do something that compromises the fact that I've defected the village. Kazuo quickly thought in his mind, already thinking of ways to use the village for all it's worth. It was at this moment that a medical ninja came inside the room. You've woken up. We will be doing some quick checks immediately to see if anything is wrong. The Hokage has already been notified and has said that he will be arriving quickly. The nurse spoke in a formal tone as she walked to his side and sat on a small white medical chair before lifting her hand towards Kazuo's abdomen, her hand glowing blue. Do they have a sensor to see when people wake up? Or some other kind of system? Kazuo thought inwardly as his body tensed slightly. This was someone he didn't know, and it was almost instinctual for Kazuo to be wary of all ninja, even Konoha ones. He had died his fair share of times to them after all. Root is gone, however, that's one good thing. Rest well in hell, you piece of shit. Kazuo thought, having to stop himself from smirking outwardly so he wouldn't seem like a madman. Everything seems to be in order. You're healthy, however, your chakra reserves are still recovering, and the chakra network is still overused. Rest for a week with no training or major chakra usage, and everything should be fine. You will likely experience another bout of military pill addiction withdrawal symptoms during this time. You'll be given some medicine to counter it, which should similarly be gone after around 2 to 4 weeks. Come in for a checkup every week, the medical ninja said as she lifted her hand and walked out of the room. I'll have that damn withdrawal again? It was bad enough last time, fucking hell. Kazuo thought, almost shivering at the memories of cold sweat and cravings that had kept him up almost all night for days. Kazuo! A voice said as 4 people rushed inside after the ninja. Obito Uchiha, Kakashi Hatake, Rin Nohara, and Minato Namikaze. Rin instantly ran to his side and sat down whilst the 3 others walked and stood around the bed. How are you? What did the nurse say? Kakashi questioned, his face donning his usual almost emotionless expression. Nothing much, said I was healthy however, I need a minimum of 1 week's rest before I can train again, and then I'll have to deal with military pill addiction for around 2 to 4 weeks. But overall, I'm not in any bad condition. Kazuo replied. Right, that's great, Obito said awkwardly as he looked at the scene of Rin practically on top of Kazuo. Looking at the sight, Kazuo felt both disgusted and, at the same time, felt like laughing aloud. She's a damn kid, you asshole. I may be an arsonist, serial killer, thief, sociopath, or psychopath, however, I am not a pedophile. No thanks, but fuck, I really want to fuck with his head. Kazuo thought inwardly, grinning whilst maintaining a soft, warm smile on his face. So how's everything going, sensei? Is the recovery of the village going well? Kazuo asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. Well, yes, most of the buildings are under reconstruction, the main damage is to the shinobi forces, but even they are not so high that we can't recover from them relatively quickly. There are some other certain matters that I can't talk about here, so I'd like you to come to my house after you are discharged. Minato replied, in a voice that felt strange to Kazuo. He's serious, however, this tone and expression, it's not how Minato would usually give to his student who just woke up from a coma. Kazuo thought instantly suspicious. Anyway, how long was I out for? Kazuo asked curiously as he lay back down on the bed. 3 days, thankfully, we managed to find you quickly enough, or you may not have even survived. You were in severe chakra depletion when we found you unconscious. What happened? Rin said, her voice tinged with fear for him. Well, this masked guy came after me. Thankfully I managed to dodge him for enough time that he decided to give up on me however, I had to use a lot of my chakra, leaving me in that state, Kazuo replied calmly, his voice and tone completely stable, giving no signs to the fact that he was lying at all. Right, the masked man. They say he was a Uchiha. Did you see anything, Kazuo? Obito asked, his voice slightly strained. It was clear that this was a touchy subject for him. He is. I saw something resembling a Sharingan through his mask, though the pattern was different from the usual Tomo. Kazuo replied, his expression turning serious. It would be great if Konoha found some information about this guy, Kazuo thought inwardly. Chapter 138, a Manjikyu, it's the only possibility considering he could control the 9 tails with it. A regular Sharingan is incapable of affecting tailed beasts. Minato replied. Like Obito's? Then the abilities with the fog were likely his Manjikyu ones, however, with the amount that he was using them, wouldn't he go blind? Kazuo asked. He would, but the process can be slowed down by quite a lot if there is a medical ninja to help repair the pathways after he uses it, and he appeared to have some kind of regenerative capabilities. He almost completely recovered the damage that I dealt to him. Right, anyways, I should be able to come by and talk by the end of the day, just have to talk with the medical ninja, Kazuo said as he scratched the top of his head. Alright, then we will leave you to rest for a bit longer, Minato replied with a court nod as he disappeared in a small puff of smoke. Yeah, make sure to get plenty of rest, bastard. Get well soon, Kazuo. HN. The 3 younger shinobi said as they gave nods and walked out of the hospital room. So she didn't come, or maybe she did whilst I was asleep. Kazuo thought as his mind went to the woman he was married to and that he had saved during the 9 tails attack. It's going too slowly, sure, she's in debt to me however, I'll soon be defecting completely, or maybe he wants to keep me inside the village as a spy however, I can't depend on that happening. Should I just get her to a closed location and grab her eyes, or should I do something similar to a certain Uchiha? By gathering enough Byakugan, the Otsutsuki on the moon managed to create a giant Tensigen. If I could somehow learn the location of the portal to the moon and head there, then I should be able to get the means on how to do something similar. Kazuo thought his mind was already whirring into action already as he thought of how he could best use his relation to the Hyuga clan. Nevertheless, I should at least leave some of the Hyuga alive, Hinata, the patriarch of the head, as well as his twin. The main objective, however, would be killing the elders. This could actually come into use and would be beneficial to the Hyuga clan. That could work if I ever wanted to come back to Konoha's side in the future, as I would have a reason for what I had done. Thought my charisma stat would have to at least be an S if I wanted it to actually work and come back to Konoha and convince them of my actions. I could also tell my plan to my wife, and if she agrees? Great, a subordinate inside of Konoha. If not, I could simply knock her out and finish the deal before she woke up. Killing her now that I think of it would simply not give me anything of actual value at this point in time. Kazuo thought as he slowly got up from the bed. His body was almost completely cramped, and the movements were stiff however, his mobility was quickly returning, a perk of chakra even in his current depleted state. His body was much better than that of an average civilian. Walking towards the door, Kazuo's movements started as still but quickly turned fluid as he got used to the minimal pain and cramps, and then he straightened his body. Looking down at himself, he quickly noticed the fact that he was in hospital gowns, something that had momentarily escaped his mind. Pressing 2 fingers to his wrist, he quickly pulled out a regular pair of shinobi standard issue clothes and wore them before heading out. Walking down the halls, he could still hear groaning and medical staff rushing around. It was clear that the medical emergencies from that night hadn't yet stopped, and people were still in dangerous situations, and death was still a constant on top of all medical ninjas' heads. After a few minutes of walking around, he quickly found the medical staff reception, where he quickly asked about his discharge. A few minutes later, the process was completed, and he was told that he could leave and should return after a week for another checkup. Nodding his head, Kazuo walked out of the hospital and into the streets of Konoha. The sounds that usually were bustling around the village were much more muted, and it was clear that the air was dark. The mood hadn't improved in the slightest. People were still in the midst of their grieving. He decided that he had no need to use the body flicker jutsu to head to his destination and instead walk through the village. Walking down the street, many people turned to face him with eyes that even in this misery were filled with adoration. Right. I did kind of blow the fuck out of the 9 tails in the middle of the village. All that reputation gain is going down the trash. Kazuo thought inwardly, still mildly pissed that he couldn't just accept the Akatsuki position, get the rewards, and go back in time. Angel-sama. A small kid said as they ran to him and hugged his leg. Ah, who might you be? I'm not an angel, kiddo. Kazuo spoke, his tone warming up instantly as he crouched down to the kids' level and ruffled their heads affectionately. You're our savior, Mom said so. She said you're an angel of the village. The small girl spoke with shining eyes, a clear counterpoint to the air the adults had. It was clear that the child was more attached to the legendary achievement of that night rather than the deaths. I see, well then I'll be your angel, and the angel of all the little kids like you, Kazuo said with a heartwarming smile as he patted their head. Angel, my ass, if it benefited me, I'd put you in a basement. Kazuo thought inwardly. Chapter 139, around half an hour later, Kazuo arrived at the corner where the Namikaze residence stood. It was a medium-sized circular house. He had been there many times before after team training, talking, laughing and eating with the rest of Team 7 and Kushina Uzumaki. Going up the small staircase to the door, Kazuo was about to knock when the door swung open. Before him stood Kushina Uzumaki. Her vitality seemed to have already returned and she looked just as fine as she had, as if a tailed beast hadn't been ripped out of her belly as soon as she had given birth to her child a mere few days ago. Uzumaki bullshit. Kazuo thought to himself inwardly whilst on the outside his expression turned into a sunny smile of joy as he looked at this sensei's wife. Kushina-ne. I'm glad to see that you're feeling better. Is that little Naruto? Kazuo asked as his eyes turned to the small bundle in her hands. Kazuo! Yes, it's Naruto, isn't he just so cute? Come inside. Kushina replied as her eyes practically sparkled as she showed the small child before turning to head inside. Ugly-ass kid. Kazuo thought as he followed her inside the house and closed the door behind him. He gets pretty good looking later on, but like damn is that thing ugly right now. Kazuo thought to himself as he arrived in the living room and instantly he noticed Minato and the rest of Team 7 were already there waiting for him. Sensei? Kazuo spoke aloud, his voice tinged with confusion at the scene before him. Sit down, Kazuo. We couldn't do much because you were in a bad situation, however we have to be sure, so I've also brought the Yamanaka Patriarch for this. It'll be a quick mind jump. Minato spoke as he motioned to the corner where another man stood. Kazuo hadn't even noticed the blonde-haired man. Yamanaka? Fuck! 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 Minato, you piece of shit. Kazuo thought as he turned towards the Yamanaka and gave a nod. Is that really necessary though, Minato-sensei? And at the same time, do we really have to do it as soon as I got out of the hospital? Kazuo asked. His voice showed confusion on the outside whilst on the inside he was gritting his teeth with pure unadulterated hate at the yellow-haired Hokage. That's why I got the Patriarch. He's skilled enough that I can guarantee nothing wrong will happen. We just need to see if something happened or if your memories have been altered. Minato said, his voice softer however still just as serious as before. It was clear that the man was not going to be taking no as a response. I have a condition, Minato-sensei. Kazuo said as he looked at Minato seriously, no longer showing any confusion on the outside. Condition? What is it? Minato asked curiously as he tilted his head just slightly to the left. Only information about that night will be extracted. I don't wish for someone to look through my entire memories. I feel like my contributions to the village are more than enough for me to at least ask of this. Kazuo said, his voice firm showing that he wouldn't be budging from this position. Of course, Kazuo, that isn't a problem at all. Minato replied easily, his tone starting to become more similar to the one he had used on his students before than to the Hokage. I'm still in fucking trouble. How the fuck do I hide the deal that I made with that fucker on that night? That's the most likely part of the night they will be investigating anyway. Fuck, just what can I even do at this point? Time resetting won't work. I'll just return to today. Should I instantly start my plan? No, if I reset to the beginning of this day when I woke up from the coma, my body will still be in terrible condition. I won't be able to defeat a lot of the Hyuga clan. Damn, fucking damn it. Kazuo thought as he kept cursing the situation and the masked man at the same time. Are you ready? the Yamanaka head asked as he walked closer to Kazuo. Finally his face was in the light. Strangely, the man appeared quite young for a patriarch, around the same age as Minato Namikaze. This guy must be Yamanaka Ino's father. I forgot what his name was, however. Kazuo thought as he gave a nod to the man. Sit down cross-legged on the ground and form a meditation pose before closing your eyes. That will make the process easier, the man said as he sat down on the tatami mat and patted the space before him. Nodding his head, Kazuo sat down in front of the man, crossed his legs and closed his eyes. Meanwhile, the rest of the room was already leaning in towards the scene. Kushina's arms had stopped moving as she had lulled Naruto to sleep, and instead her eyes were fixed on Kazuo. Kushina had always felt like something had been off about Kazuo. It was small, but sometimes she could sense negative emotions building up inside the boy before being crushed instantly. Obito, Kakashi, and Rin meanwhile held no such suspicions. They had been saved by their teammate more than a dozen times and had left their lives in his hands more than enough times for them to completely trust him. Minato himself felt a degree of trust for the boy, however, at the same time, he hadn't forgotten that Kazuo had been given to him to monitor at the start, and it wasn't as if the boy didn't have secrets. At first it was the insane amount of strategical intelligence that rivaled Inara, then it was the paper release Kekka Jinkai, and now he had even heard from his other students that it was possible that he was either in a Jinjutsu or he had somehow developed a dojutsu. Chapter 140, Yamanaka Inoichi placed his hands together and formed a hand sign. It was a unique one, much different from the regular ones that were used in normal jutsu. His hands somewhat formed a triangle that pointed directly towards Kazuo, before he lifted his hands and pointed the triangle directly towards Kazuo's head and then closed his eyes. Kazuo felt nothing for a mere moment before it happened. Thump! It was like something had suddenly invaded him, the inside of his mind in an instant, and had torn the mental barrier in an instant. Inside his own mind, Kazuo found himself in his mindscape, a place where all his memories were held and guarded. A slow, insidious smile appeared on his face as he noticed Yamanaka Inoichi further away from him, walking towards a cluster of light balls. Those are likely my memories that he's heading towards. This place is my mindscape. I shouldn't be here, most likely, considering that he doesn't seem to have noticed or expected me. So it could be because of my master of in release and mind jutsu of my own, like mind exhaustion and mind break. But this works perfectly. His mind is here. If I can defeat him inside here and break his mind, it'll make me suspicious and most likely detain. However, I could simply say that I didn't know what happened, or that my body might have an innate resistance to such attacks. It's still much better than him finding out I'm already a rogue ninja. Kazuo thought quickly before closing his eyes. He had received the memories of his shadow clone whilst he had been in a coma, and he was quite surprised to find out about the capabilities of the dojutsu. Whilst it didn't look like much, it was in fact broken if used correctly. Opening his eyes, they were now a shining dark orange with a clock symbol replacing the pupils. Using all his strength to run forward at his maximum speed, Kazuo ran towards Yamanaka Inoichi. He didn't use any chakra, as that would most likely alarm the people on the outside. The dojutsu didn't have high chakra requirements to activate, so it wouldn't be noticeable and people would just chalk it up to Inoichi simply doing his job. At least Kazuo hoped so. Steps were heard on the water tiles. At the sound, Yamanaka Inoichi froze before quickly turning around, his hand already lifting to perform a jutsu. Looking at Kazuo, who was running towards him with shining orange eyes, Inoichi instantly felt sweat start to build up above his brow. This hadn't been what he was expecting. "What are you doing, Kazuo?" Inoichi quickly asked as he prepared to stall for a bit of time before launching a jutsu or simply heading out of the mindscape. Kazuo didn't speak, nor did he stop. He simply continued running towards the man at faster and faster speeds, his body becoming a blur. Arriving close to him, Kazuo finally lifted his hand and started making hand seals. In release, mind break. At the moment in chakra started to gather near his hand that was already outstretched towards Inoichi, the man started to turn away, ready to use a jutsu like the body flicker. That would have been fine if he had been on time. When running at high speeds, someone can traverse the remaining distance between the two of them in a split second. And Kazuo had the means to control that split second. Kazuo opened his eyes fully, the clock being completely revealed. the ticking hand representing the second stopped, just for a mere fraction of the second. The fraction of a second that it stopped, a mere 0.1 seconds, were enough for Kazuo's hand to reach Inoichi's head. Pushing as much chakra as his currently depleted body could, Kazuo performed the in-release jutsu. For a split moment, nothing seemed to happen. That moment turned into a second, 2, 3, and on the 4th second, a scream of pure, unadulterated ravaging pain erupted from Yamanaka Inoichi's mouth as his body started convulsing both inside Kazuo's mindscape and on the outside world. Minato instantly shot up to his feet. At the last second he had clearly sensed the chakra fluctuations inside of Kazuo's body. "Obito," Minato said quickly as he motioned with his hand towards Kazuo. Obito nodded before opening his Sharingan and looking at Kazuo, his eyes widening at what he saw. The Sharingan had lower chakra seeing capabilities than the Byakugan, however even they could clearly see when someone was using a dojutsu. His eyes. Obito spoke out loud, his voice faintly shaking. Not wasting a moment, Minato instantly crouched down before Kazuo's half-unconscious body and opened his eyelids with one finger, and there it was. The orange clock pupils. What are those eyes?" Kakashi and Rin asked at the same time, completely confused as they stared at their teammate. "No idea, I'd never seen anything like them before. At this point, however, I can only come up with two hypotheses. First one is that Kazuo has kept this hidden from us for a long time now and is actually already someone who has betrayed the village. The second one is that he only recently awakened this and he didn't know that it would have a mind protection effect that would result in Inoichi becoming like this." Minato spoke as he gritted his teeth. The situation had become much more complicated than before. Now he had a very much plausible traitor on his hands that was also his student, and at the same time he had a convulsing Yamanaka patriarch in the middle of his living room. "Rin, check up on Inoichi," Minato said as his hand flashed and he knocked Kazuo out with quick palm to his neck. This should make it so that the jutsu is dispersed and Inoichi is fully returned to his body. Let's just hope the damage to his mind isn't too big, or this is another scandal, Minato thought as he ran a hand through his hair. That's the end of this tale for now. Thank you for watch and I'll see you in part 8. Peace.